Okay, so welcome to this lecture series on Environment and Ecology presented by Mentors for IS in association with Bangalore IS Academy and Namak APSC. So in this video, we'll be discussing about aquatic ecosystems. Okay, so an ecosystem is nothing but a community of organisms that live and interact within a particular environment. When it comes to an aquatic ecosystem, that environment is water, and all these systems, plants and animals, live either in or on that water. So the specific setting and type of water, such as a freshwater lake or a saltwater marsh, actually determines which animals and plants actually live there. Now, we have already classified aquatic ecosystems when discussing biomes, but generally we always classify aquatic ecosystems on the basis of salinity. So on the basis of salinity, we can classify the aquatic ecosystems into three types. One is freshwater ecosystem, two, we have the marine ecosystem, and finally we have the brackish water ecosystems. So the first type is the freshwater ecosystems. So the freshwater ecosystems, this is nothing but due to continuous cycling that it has low salinity or low salt content, that is less than 5 parts per thousand. So whenever the salinity level is low, we refer it to as freshwater ecosystems, that is the salt content is less than 5 parts per thousand. The freshwater ecosystems can be further classified into lotic ecosystems, that is moving water such as rivers and streams, as well as lentic ecosystems, that is stagnant water such as lakes and ponds. The second type of aquatic ecosystem is marine ecosystem. Now, marine ecosystems are water bodies with very high salt concentration, that is more than 35 parts per thousand. Obviously, this is nothing but your oceans and seas. So this makes up for the marine ecosystems. The third type of aquatic ecosystem is the brackish water ecosystems. Now, brackish water ecosystems have salt concentration between 5 to 35 parts per thousand. So whenever the salt concentration is anywhere 5 parts per thousand to 35 parts per thousand, that is when we refer it to as a brackish water ecosystem. Therefore, the salinity level of brackish water ecosystems is anywhere between that of freshwater ecosystems and marine water ecosystems. So your examples would be estuaries, mangroves and marshes. Okay, so I want you to know that, see, the salinity in water is nothing but due to the presence of salts. Now, usually whatever water body that you take, the most abundant type of salt that you have is always sodium chloride. You can always make a note of it, NaCl. Sodium chloride is the most abundant type of salt which is actually present in water bodies. So if this is understood, next let us move on to the aquatic organisms. So the aquatic organisms, both flora and fauna, are unevenly distributed in the aquatic ecosystem but can be classified into 5 major groups based on where they are found within this water body. So there are 5 types here. We have Newstream, Periphyton, Plankton, Nekton and benthos. So we'll just briefly discuss each of these 5 types. Okay, the first is Newstream. Now, Newstream refers to organisms which are found along the surface of water, that is where the water and air meet, of lakes, oceans or slow moving portions of streams. So when you take a water body, the organisms which are found along the surface, they are referred to as Newstream. So the first type over here is hyponewstern. Now, hyponewstern includes species living just underneath the water surface. Take this image over here on the right hand side top over here. So this is nothing but mosquito larvae which is floating under the water's surface. So it is nothing but living just under the water surface. This is hyponeuston. The second is epineusten. Now, species that are above but immersed in water. This represents epineusten. For example, your water lily or your lotus, for example. Now, they are immersed underwater. They are growing from the bottom up, but still they are along the surface. This represents epineusten. And finally, we have superneusten. Now, superneusten refers to organisms that are able to travel over the surface on hydrophobic structures. For example, you can take this particular insect over here, which is known as a water strider, which can more or less glide over the water surface by supporting its weight on water tension. So this is known as Newstern. Sometimes Newstern can also be referred to as Pleuston. Now, what I want you to remember is that due to their nature, these type of organisms referred to as Newstern, they are found usually in stagnant water. So water should not be moving. So lakes, ponds, this is where you have these type of organisms. If there's a lot of turbulence like a river, for example, these type of organisms will not be found over there. So this makes up for the first type of organism, which is or aquatic organism. Second type is Periphyton. Now, Periphyton refers to organisms such as algae, cyanobacteria, and heterotrophic microbes that attach themselves to submerged surfaces in aquatic ecosystems. So, they may be found on rocks, underwater plants, or any other surface underwater. So you can see in this image over here. So this looks like moss on a rock surface. So these are nothing but periphyton. Now these are nothing but, it could be algae which are actually growing on a surface under water, and it is not restricted only to rock surfaces. They could also attach themselves on other organisms. They can also attach themselves on plants, underwater plants, for example. Now, the importance of periphyton is that periphyton actually serves as an important food source for invertebrates, tadpoles, and the fish which live under water. Apart from that, I want you to remember this: periphyton can also absorb contaminants from water and hence acts as an indicator of water quality. Please remember, I'll just repeat this: it can absorb contaminants from water and can act as an indicator of water quality. Now, since it acts as an indicator of water quality, there are certain properties that you must know when it comes to periphyton as to why does it act as an indicator of water quality. Now, the reason it acts as an indicator is that, one, it is known for its sensitivity to change and also its tolerance level. It is known for its sensitivity to change. Second, it has a very fast response to change. It has a fast response to change. And third, it is easy to sample. It is easy to sample. So this covers up periphyton. And in some areas, in some what do you call as aquaculture, where aquaculture growth is carried out, periphyton communities are also used as a filtering system in such aquacultures to remove solid and dissolved pollutants. So this makes up for periphyton. Third, we move on to plankton. Now, plankton refers to the diverse collection of organisms that live in large water bodies and are unable to swim against a current. The individual organisms constituting plankton are called plankters. So this includes bacteria, archaea, algae, protozoa, and other drifting and floating animals that inhabit the pelagic zone of oceans. Now there are different zones in a water body. This will take it up later. Okay, so coming back to plankton, some plankton will drift this way for their entire life cycle, whereas others are classified as plankton only when they are young. for example, jellyfish, for example. What I'm trying to say is that some organisms, when they are young, they are so small that they are not able to navigate the water. So they cannot navigate against the water's force. So in whichever direction the water is moving, they will also move along in the same direction. However, some of these organisms can grow up to become larger in size, and they should be able to navigate pretty comfortably. But generally, plankton refers to all those microscopic organisms which are not able to navigate by themselves to a great extent. That is, free movement is restricted to a great extent depending upon the force of moving water. So what we will do here is that we will broadly classify planktons into two types. One is phytoplankton, the other is zooplankton. Now, phytoplankton represents plants, whereas zooplankton represents animals. Okay, so I'll just briefly discuss phytoplankton and zooplankton. You can just make a note of these things. Okay, so these two pictures over here, the top one denotes phytoplankton, whereas the one in the bottom represents zooplankton. Now, phytoplankton are microscopic plants which play a huge role in the marine food web. So like plants on land, they have chlorophyll, use nutrients from the surroundings, and through photosynthesis use sun's energy to support themselves. Phytoplankton actually account for almost half of the photosynthesis on the planet, making them one of the largest producers of oxygen on the planet. Since they need sun's energy for photosynthesis, they are found very close to the water surface and not at greater depths. Please make a note of this point. Phytoplankton, since they need sun's energy, since they depend on sunlight for photosynthesis, they are more or less found very close to the surface, but not on the surface like Newstream. They are found very close to the surface where there is penetration of sunlight. So this makes up for phytoplankton. Next, moving on to zooplankton. Zooplankton includes microscopic animals like krill, sea snails, or pelagic worms. It also includes younger ones of larger invertebrates and fish, as well as weak swimmers like jellyfish. So most zooplankton eat phytoplankton, and in turn they are eaten by larger animals. For example, krill, which I just mentioned is an example for zooplankton, is a major component of the diet of whales. So zooplankton feed on phytoplankton. Zooplankton in turn are fed upon by other organisms higher up in the food chain. Say for example, whales do feed on zooplankton. So here what happens is that during daylight, zooplankton generally drift in deeper waters to avoid predators. But at night, these microscopic creatures venture to the surface to feed on phytoplankton. This process is actually considered to be the largest migration on Earth and also visible from space. Now, planktons can actually be found in salt water and fresh water. One way to actually tell if a body of water has large plankton population is to look at its clarity. Very clear water means less plankton population. Okay, now if this is understood, let us slowly move on to the significance of plankton. Now planktons actually play a very important role in aquatic ecosystems. So based on whatever I have said, I think it should be pretty clear that they have a significant role to play in the aquatic ecosystem, the food web, the carbon cycle, as well as the oxygen cycle. Carbon cycle, why? Because you have phytoplankton which through photosynthesis fix carbon. Oxygen cycle, why? Because zooplankton and other zooplankton takes in this oxygen and releases carbon dioxide. Zooplankton and phytoplankton form that basic level in a food web, and in turn they help in maintaining the entire ecosystem. So planktons are incredibly important to the ocean's ecosystem, and they are also very sensitive to changes in their environment such as temperature, salinity, pH level, and nutrient concentration of water. For example, when there are too many of certain nutrients in the water, it results in harmful algae blooms like something known as red tides. something known as red tides. You should be able to see this red tide over here. This is nothing but what you call as an explosion in the reproduction of these algae, phytoplankton. So they are reproducing at a rapid rate due to favorable conditions, that is nutrients, because nutrients also act as a limiting factor over here. So this is nothing but known as a red tide. Also, climate change is today affecting their timing and abundance, which in turn is now affecting the population of zooplankton and hence the entire food chain. So human activities like temperature increase, acidification of ocean waters, all these things are actually affecting the way phytoplankton are actually reproducing. Now, if the life cycle of the phytoplankton is affected, this will affect the zooplankton. If zooplanktons are affected, this will in turn affect the entire aquatic food web or food chain. Therefore, it is actually important to ensure that the population, that the reproduction rate of phytoplankton is actually viable in aquatic ecosystems. If not, the entire aquatic ecosystem itself may go haywire. So this completes our discussion on plankton. Next, we move on to Nekton. First, we'll discuss Nekton. Now, Nekton refers to aquatic organisms which are active swimmers. So they are relatively large and powerful as they have to overcome water currents. So Nekton includes your fish, shark, whales, reptiles, seals, crab, all that can easily navigate through water, and they are generally nothing but your heterotrophs in your aquatic ecosystem. However, you can just make a note of this. As I've already mentioned, some organisms may start their life as plankton, but as they grow, they will transition into Nekton. So Nekton represents all your fishes, all those big animals which are able to swim in water bodies. This is nothing but Nekton. Next, we can move on to benthos. Now, the benthic organisms are those which are found in the bottom of the water bodies, that is the seabed, riverbed or lake bed. So in this image you can see the bottom of the water body. So those organisms which are found along the bottom of the water bodies, they are referred to as benthos or benthic organisms. Now, since light is absorbed before it can reach the bottom of water bodies, the energy source for deep benthic ecosystems is often organic matter which sinks from higher up in the water column. That is nothing but your when dead and decaying matter from a higher level slowly drifts down to the depths. So this dead and decay matter actually forms the main food source and energy source for these benthic organisms which are found at the bottom of the water body. So the dead and decaying matter sustains the benthic food chain and is mostly made of scavengers and detritivores. So if the main source of food is nothing but dead and decaying matter, obviously your benthic organisms are mostly made up of scavengers and detritivores, but it is not restricted only to scavengers or detritivores. Say for example, you may have stingray, which is actually a fish. It may not only be a scavenger. You can also have aquatic plants which are found along the surface, but in shallow waters, but still at the bottom of the water body. They may all form a part of your benthic organisms or life which is found along the bottom of the water body. So this makes up for benthos. So with this we actually cover or complete our introduction to aquatic ecosystems and also the different aquatic organisms. If you do have any doubts, please do write to us in the comment section. Thank you.